So although we didn't meet last week of course was the giving of the Torah, Parshas Yisro, where you have the whole story of man and God touching. Man goes up the mountain, God comes down to the mountain, and God gives Moshe the Torah, right? The information for the Torah, the 10 Commandments or the 10 statements. And then we have this very amazingly spiritual, uplifting, extraordinary, once in the history of the world occasion where you actually have this happen, right? So you'd imagine that now that this has happened, the first thing that God's going to tell Moshe after he finishes it, right, the next section, the next parsha that we start is going to be a very important parsha. It's going to have to be very, very deep, very spiritual, very important, because it's the first one after the Torah is given, right? That's what you would think. So let's look. That's what this is. This parsha, Mishpatim, is just that. And it begins, Ve'ela ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem, and these are the laws that you shall place before them. That God tells Moshe, you should bring this to the elders, to the Jewish people. These are the laws. So that now we're getting ready, right? God just has this amazing once in the history of the world occasion. He's going to give the Torah to the Jewish people, and he tells Moshe, here it is, go and teach these laws to the Jewish people. So I think it's got to be these very important, very special, very holy laws. And what does he say? He begins, Ki sikna eved ivri sheish shanim yavod. When you acquire a Jewish slave, for 6 years he should work. Uvishviz yetze lechashvi chinam. In the 7th year he should go out free. And then it goes through this whole discussion. So, like, what's going on here? God gives us the Torah. It's momentous. It's enormous. In the history of the world, never happened before, never happened again. And he gives us his book to tell us this is the whole purpose of the world. Now go, Moshe, teach this to the people. So Moshe gathers them all and says, we had this amazing thing happen. God gave us the Torah. Here we go. You ready? I'm going to tell you what it says. When you have a Hebrew slave, he shall work for you for 6 years, and the 7th year you should let him go for free. So what is that? How anticlimactic can you be? Tell me about keeping Shabbat. Tell me about becoming close to God. But tell me, slaves, what does that have to do with it? Why is that so important? That's the first thing that he tells us. So, to even make it more interesting, is the way the parsha actually begins. Instead of saying, Eila Mishpatim, these are the laws which Moshe, you should hand over to the Jewish people, it says, Va'ela ha-mishpatim, and these are the laws. Well, this is the beginning of the parsha. Have you ever read a book? The first word of the book is and. Right? You're not supposed to start a sentence with and, right? And means that there's something before. Well, if you begin a parsha and you say, and these are the laws, well, what's before the and? Right? So we have to look before, what's before the end is the end of last week's parsha. And last week's parsha was the parsha when we got the Torah, as we said. The parsha where God and man actually interact, right, at an amazing level. And the whole purpose of the creation of the world and the creating of people is finally given to the people. And that's last week's parsha. And it says, and the laws of this week's parsha should be taught to the people. So it's telling you there's some relationship between the amazingly holy and supernatural things that happened in last week's parsha and what seems to be sort of mundane laws about slavery in this week's parsha. But there's an actual relationship. So before I just told you that last week's parsha was so amazing and this one seems to be a letdown. The first one should be great. It doesn't seem to be that. And not only that, but for some reason the Torah is telling you that what happened in last week's parsha and what I'm telling you in this week's parsha are actually one story. It's not two different stories. And it certainly seems like two different stories. So why is that? Thirdly, of all of the laws that it could tell us, right? Or for some reason the Torah wants to tell us what seems like sort of mundane laws, the laws of slaves. Here the Jewish people just came out of Egypt. They just spent close to 300 years as slaves in Egypt, right? The first thing you tell them, they've only been out of Egypt now for 7 weeks. The first thing God tells them is when you have a slave, you have to let him go in the 7th year. And then it tells all the laws of how to treat a slave. But you're talking to slaves. They were slaves 7 weeks ago. Now they're not slaves. So what do you want to do? You want to tell them they're free and then start sort of rub their nose in it? They already got to talk about slaves. It's like you get a person who's, let's say he was in jail and he comes out of jail and needs a job. So you say, I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to hire this guy who was in jail and give him a job so he should stay honest. And as soon as he gets a job with me, I go to him and I say, so listen, when either you're working here, I don't want any stealing. You say, well, why would you do that? If you hired the guy because you want to give him a break, why do you humiliate him? That's what it sounds like here. God, we were in Egypt as slaves. God took us out of Egypt, and the first thing he tells us is what to do with slaves. Don't you think we were slaves long enough we would know what to do with slaves? How painful it could be to be a slave, how you should treat them? So that seems to be, all of this seems to be very strange. But it all really ties together. The point is as follows, that while I gave the premise that there is a difference between the laws and the ideas that are very important and spiritual and deep and the regular mundane laws like what to do with a slave, the truth is there isn't a difference. The reason that there is no difference is because the laws of everyday life and the laws of great spiritual occurrences are exactly the same. See, in our world, the Jewish world, we don't divide between what is holy and what is regular. We don't have such a thing. See, the world that we live in, every single religion of the world other than ours says that you have a spiritual thing that happens, like the giving of the Torah, or whatever their religion says happened, very spiritual, very separate from the physical world. And then they say that's spirituality. The rest of our life, we're in the physical world. We have to stay away from the physical world as much as possible. You don't want to be too involved in the physical world because the physical world pulls you down. It makes you physical. You want to be spiritual. You want to be up in the air. You want to be like these guys who sit in the mountains. And they just meditate all the time. They don't work. They don't have families. That's all they do. They're just totally spiritual. That's how the world looks at spirituality. The world says that money is evil. The physical world is evil. Sexuality is evil. All of these things are bad. Judaism says none of that's true. Judaism says that the physical world is not bad. The physical world was placed here by God for us to use as a tool, as a way, a vehicle, to be able for us to become spiritual. If God created money, he created money for us to be able to buy a lulav. He created money for us to give to the poor. He created money for us to be able to buy matzah on Passover. You can't say, that money is evil, and then you have to have money to buy food. Right? It can't be evil. Right? How about intimacy? We said the rest of the world says intimacy is evil. You have to stay away from it. We say that's not the case at all. Intimacy is an act of giving. It's something that you do for somebody that you care about. The same thing with everything in the physical world, be it food, money, everything that we have in the physical world. We believe the purpose of the physical world is a tool that we use to become spiritual. We have money so we can give it to the poor. That's how we become spiritual. We need to eat. We buy food. We buy kosher food. We make blessings before we eat. We bless after we eat. And we use the energy to do good. So we take the physical world and we make it spiritual. So that's why it tells us, the first thing the Torah tells us when we get the Torah, God says to Moshe, you've got the Torah, now get out of the clouds, go down on the earth like everybody else, and tell them how to live their life. How do you do business? How do you act? How do you treat people? How are you in the street? Then when you do that, then you'll have the same effect as if you were on the mountain. So the whole world doesn't agree with that, but that's what we Jews believe. And therefore, the Behersheba not only tells you what seems to be mundane laws, and therefore tells you there's no such thing as mundane laws, because even something looks mundane, it's really holy. But it begins with a vav, and vav means and you don't begin a sentence with and. So it's telling you that it's not the beginning of the sentence. The beginning of the sentence is last week's parsha. And that's telling you that what happened in last week's parsha and what happens in this week's parsha is the same thing. God gave the Torah to the Jewish people in last week's parsha, this amazing spiritual thing. And this week's parsha we're going to learn how to live in the physical world. And that's also an amazing spiritual thing. And they're both the same. So now we can understand that. So then why specifically is the first thing that God tells us is how to treat slaves? We were slaves for 300 years. You don't think we know how to treat them? We don't know how to treat somebody? We don't know how painful it is to be a slave? The point is God is following this idea of seizing the day, seizing the moment. That people have these things happen to somebody, and it sensitizes you to things. Like for instance, let's say that you're a doctor, and you're very smart, and you work very hard, and you become a very good doctor. and somebody comes in, and you tell them that they have to have a simple operation, and they start to cry. And they're afraid. They don't know what's going to happen. They've never had an operation before. Maybe they'll die. Maybe it won't work right. And you've done a million of these operations. You don't understand why they're crying. You don't understand. What are they so upset about? I do these every day. Nobody ever dies from it. Everybody is fine. What are they so upset about? So as time goes on, that doctor then one day gets a call from his doctor and says, listen, you had your checkup. You're going to need this little procedure. Right? And he goes in for the procedure, and he suddenly realizes, he now understands why people get upset. Because he also knows there's statistics, and people die from procedures, and people take anesthetic, and it doesn't work right, and things happen. Sure, it's just a few. Millions are fine, and just a few are not. But now the doctor realizes himself, on an emotional and real level, exactly what could happen to him when he has this operation. So he gets scared, even though he's a doctor and he knows better. So then what happens is the doctor goes back to the hospital and he's got to do operations for people again. From that point on, he's going to be sensitive to those people who start to cry, because he understands how they feel now, because he experienced the same thing. Before then, he didn't experience it, but as soon as he did, he does. If he then takes that feeling that he has and he makes himself remember that feeling, he'll be a better doctor, because he'll be able to understand his patients, be able to make them feel better, and then he can do the operations. But if he forgets, it does no good. So God says to the Jewish people, for 300 years you were abused. You were murdered, you were abused, you were destroyed, you were worked without pay, you were slaves for 300 years. Now you're free. Lots of times when people have gone through hardships and then they become free, they feel other people should go through the hardships. I did it, I'm okay, then you can do it too. So they'll take slaves and they'll abuse the slaves. And God says, no. Right now you're coming out of Egypt. You know how bad it was? You're sensitive to that. You're going to treat slaves correctly. I want you to always treat slaves correctly. So he gives us a mitzvah to remind us. God grabs the day. He makes use of the moment. Right? And it's called carpe diem. In Roman or Latin. You should take the day. Right? God says, I'm going to seize this moment where right now you Jews were slaves 7 weeks ago. You feel the pain of slavery. So now when you take slaves, when the time comes that you have a legal ability to have somebody as a servant, you're going to treat them correctly, because you're going to remember. So that's why God made sure that the first thing that the Jews learned when they came out of Egypt was this idea, because it was still fresh in their minds. The pain was still real to them. And before that pain faded, he wanted to make sure that they became sensitive to the pain of other people. So that's why he begins with that. And then this goes on, and it talks more about slaves and what happens to slaves and so forth. We've got a basic idea. And then we go through all various types of curses of what happens. A person who hits another person, what would happen? If a person hits their father, what would happen? If two people fight and they hurt each other, what would happen? It goes through all these various things and what the penalty is. Because here, you'd say, like, in general, if I ask somebody, why don't you, like, let's say somebody takes your parking spot, why don't you go over and punch him? Why don't you do that? Why don't you, right? Or if you owe somebody money, you can't pay him back, why don't you kill them? So you say, well, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go over and hit somebody because I don't want them to hit me. And I don't want to punch somebody because I don't want them to punch me. And I don't want to hurt somebody because I don't want them to hurt me. That's what the world says, right? The reason that you don't do bad things is because you don't want them to do it to you. But how about if they can't do it to you? What if the person you're hurting is a faceless person, like a business? What if if the phone company makes a mistake and they don't bill you, and you've got your phone for years, and you can do anything you want and call anywhere you want in the world for free for your whole life, but it's stealing because they didn't tell you you could. They just got a glitch in their computer, and it keeps showing up that you're paid and you didn't pay. Right? Sooner or later they may figure it out. So they can't catch you. They're not going to come and steal from you. So maybe you can steal from them. Right? If you think the reason you don't steal is so people shouldn't steal from you, so you can steal from this person because he can't steal from you. There's no person. It's the phone company. So the point is that all of these laws, we don't follow these laws because we don't want someone to do it to us. I don't not steal from a store because I don't want someone to steal from me. That's not why. I don't steal because God says stealing is wrong. That's why. Because the Torah tells us that it's wrong. not because man logically figured it out, but because the Torah says so. That's why you don't steal. So here is the parsha that tells us this. It tells us what happens if you hit somebody. What happens if you get into a fight with somebody? What if you hurt somebody? What if you're driving your car and you crack into somebody else's car because you weren't watching where you're going? Or you're driving your car and you hit a tree? Right? Who's responsible? How are you responsible? So the Torah tells us this. That is to say that it's all spiritual also. It all has the Torah. God took the time to put these things in the Torah. Like, you're driving your car and you hit a hole in the ground, and your tire breaks. So who has to pay for the tire? That's the price of driving a car? Or maybe the government has to pay for your tire because they're supposed to give you a road. Or maybe you didn't pay your taxes. Maybe you got to pay for the tire. So the Torah not only tells us the answer to the question, but it tells us a more important message, which is the answer is also spiritual. It's not just physical. You don't not hit someone because you don't want them to hit you. That's physical. You don't hit someone because it's wrong to hit them. Because God says you can't hit another human being. Human beings are made in my image, and you can't go and hurt somebody else. And therefore, it's now a spiritual thing. So that's why this whole parsha is filled with it. Just like the giving of the Torah was spiritual, the splitting of the Red Sea was spiritual, not hurting somebody is spiritual. Not taking your car and doing damage, or hitting another car in the parking lot and driving away, it's spiritual. You have to know how to act. Not because somebody will do it to you, but because God says so. Ultimately, that's the idea behind it. And there's page after page of these examples of what happens with thieves and so forth, and all kinds of people, and people who attack people and hurt people in all different ways. Okay, if we look on 430 and 431, we have here an interesting law. The last line, 24 or Kaf Daled, it says, Im kesef talve es ami, es ha'ani imach, lo teyeh, lo kenosi, lo tishimu, lo neshech. It says, when you lend money to my people, to the poor person who is with you, do not act towards him as a creditor. Do not lay interest upon him. If you take your fellow's garment as security until sunset, shall you return it to him? For it alone is his clothing, it is his garment for his skin. In what should he lie down? So it will be that if he cries out to me, and I will listen, for I am compassionate. So here it's telling you the following. First thing it says, there's a mitzvah to lend money. What?
Jewish to Jewish? Or?
Well, we'll have to see. First it says there's a mitzvah to lend money. Right? That's what it says. If you lend money to my people. So who are my people? That's the Jewish people. So then it's telling us that a Jew has a responsibility to lend money to another Jew. It's a mitzvah to lend money to a Jew. Not just a nice thing. It's a mitzvah. It's a good thing to do. But you can't charge him interest, it says. So this is a funny thing. I always wondered about this. You can't charge interest to somebody. Let's say I'm a bank. That's my business. And you come and you want a loan in order to buy a car. Right? So I'll lend you the money to buy a car. Why can't I charge you interest? What's wrong with it? Well, there seems to be something wrong with charging you interest. The Torah says I can't do it. So let's change money to something else. Let's say I own a car renting business, and you want to rent a car. You travel, right? You come from Montreal, you want to do business in Toronto, you fly to Toronto, you need a car to get around to your business deals, right? You come to me, I've got 10 cars, I'll rent you a car. Am I allowed to charge you? Sure, I can charge you. No, it doesn't say you can't charge someone to rent them a car. So why is it when I rent somebody a car, I can charge, I can make a profit, but if I rent somebody money, which is what a loan is, renting money, I can't make profit. I can't charge interest. Now, what's the difference? Right? You see the question? Mm-hmm. You own a grocery store, you don't sell the groceries to what you paid for, you make money on it. That's why you do it. That's your business. So if you have a cash lending business called a bank, why can't you lend money and make money on it? There seems to be something different about money. So there's something there. So the Torah is telling us a number of things here. First thing, as you asked, is dealing specifically with Jews. Jews are not allowed to charge interest to Jews. Jews are required to give a loan to another Jew. Now, don't get this wrong. It doesn't mean you have to lend money to anybody who asks you, just because they're Jewish. You have to also, have reasonable reason to believe you're going to get the money back. But you're supposed to go out of your way to try to lend money to people if you can, right? And if it's reasonable. But it says that if you do this, you can't charge interest. So the point is as follows. The Torah has an assumption that when people come to borrow an object from you, it's basically convenience. I need to, My car doesn't start today. You're my next door neighbor. You've got those cables that you attach to the battery. I'll borrow them from you and I'll use it. Why do I borrow from you? You already own them. I'm going to need them once in 20 years. So I borrow them from you. It saves me the convenience of buying them and the money from buying them. So I borrow them from you. Right? That's fine. You want to lend me. You want me to lend me something. But if I come to you and I want to borrow money, chances are I'm in trouble. In other words, I'm not making the income I should make. I'm spending more money than I have. Not necessarily am I doing that wrong. It could be I had a nice job, and now I lost the job, and now I have no money, or I have no savings. Right? It's gone. Now, I'm coming to you for a loan. If you charge me interest, the end result is you'll get me out of this immediate problem, but I'll never get out of debt. Because if I don't have enough money to live on, certainly don't have enough money to live on and interest. Right? That's even more. So therefore, if I'm coming to you for a loan for cash, the Torah has an assumption that means I'm in trouble. And it says here that we're lending money to Ami, my people. God is saying to your brothers. So now let's look at it differently. Let's say you have a good relationship with your brother. You're literally your brother, right, from the same parents. And your brother has money, and you don't have money. And you need to borrow money from somebody. Now, if you would go to your brother to borrow money, and you have a good relationship with your brother, he wouldn't charge you interest. He's your brother. Right? He's going to lend you the money because he's your brother. He's not going to make you pay, all right, I'll give you this $1,000, but you got to give me $100 extra for interest. No, because he knows you're in trouble. You need the money. So he's not going to make you be in more trouble. So he'll help you out and you'll pay him back. The money wasn't doing him any good anyway, so he might as well help you. Right? So the idea is that if a person borrows money because they're in trouble, to charge them interest, they'll never get out of debt. They'll always be in debt because they're always getting interest. So therefore, a brother would never do that to another brother, or a sister to a sister. They wouldn't do that to each other. So the Torah is telling us here, there's nothing wrong with charging interest on money. It's not evil. It's no different than renting a car to somebody. But when it comes to your own brother, literally your brother or your sister or your mother or your children, and they need money, you wouldn't charge them interest. They're in trouble. You want to help them. So the Torah is telling us here, all Jews are brothers, all Jews are sisters, all Jews are related. If another Jew is in trouble and they come to you for a loan, you can't charge them interest. Not because interest is bad, but because charging interest to your brother is bad. You wouldn't do that to your brother. A stranger you might, but not a brother. So therefore, even if you're a bank and your business is renting out money, if your brother comes, you don't charge him interest. And that's what the Torah is telling us, that all Jews are brothers. So therefore, you can't charge interest. It doesn't mean you can't make money off another Jew. If you're reasonable, if he wants to buy a car from you, you want to sell a car, you want to make a profit, you can do that. But that's because when he's buying the car, he's not in trouble. He's buying the car because he wants a car. When he's coming for cash, he's in trouble. So that's why the difference is. So that's one of the things it tells us here with borrowing money.
That the bank has overheads that what staff to pay.
Right.
So how do they pay them from?
Well, first thing is the bank doesn't have to lend money only to Jews. You can lend money to anybody. And since there's nothing wrong with charging interest, right? It's like if the bank owner, right? You have people who own banks. The bank owner is there, and people come in and they want to take out loans, so he'll charge them interest. He's not doing anything wrong. But if the bank owner's brother comes in and needs a loan, he's going to give him it without interest, right? He's still making his interest everywhere else, but his brother, he won't do that. That's the point. All Jews are brothers, right? So there are some issues that pop up, like in Israel, where there's all Jews, and so it's pretty hard to charge interest. But there's ways that things are done in order so they should be able to they should be banks. They shouldn't go out of business. Now, another thing that it tells us in this same idea about lending money, it uses the word here, the third word, tilave, which means to lend. Right? So when you lend to my people, right, you should not, right, you should, to people who are poor, you should not charge them interest.
And can you accept?
Can you pay interest? No. You also can't.
If you lend money to someone and that person returns your money plus interest,
no, you can't take it. Not if they're Jewish. You're not allowed. It goes so far as that if they would even give you a box of candy, you can't take it because that's interest. If somebody wants to say, they you lend them money and they pay it back, and 6 months later they want to, show you that, look how successful I was. I took your money. I'm not in debt anymore. I'm making a living now. You've changed my life. I want to give you a gift. They'd be allowed to, but not as a direct relationship to the money. Okay. Then it tells us, though, that you shouldn't be silly. So you have to, for instance, if you lend money to someone, you can take some type of an object that's worth money, right, in order so that person should pay you back. So for instance, I'll lend you money to fix your living room, but you have to give me the ability to take your house if you don't pay me, right? In other words, I'll take the money out of your house. I'll sell your house, take the money, and you get the rest if you don't pay me back. That's collateral. That's what that's called. So here it says, yeah, you can take collateral in the next line. It says if you take your fellow's garment as security, as collateral, you have to give it back to him every night. Imagine this guy's poor, right? He doesn't have a whole wardrobe. He's got one suit. So he comes in and he says, look, what do I have for collateral? I have my suit. So you take from his jacket, let's say, from his suit, and you say, okay, this is the collateral. I'll take the jacket, and when you pay me back the money you owe me, I'll give you your jacket back. But the Torah says that you have to wait a second. He says if the guy is giving you his jacket, he doesn't have another jacket. So what's he supposed to wear when it gets cold? What's he supposed to do at night? And you take away the things that he needs. Take away his, let's say he gives you his blankets. Are you allowed, what do you do with it? What do you do then? He can't sleep at night without a blanket. So it says you have to give it back to him every night. It's yours. The jacket is yours. The towels are yours until he pays you. But every night you have to let him use it because he needs it. So this is an amazing idea, because if you go to a bank and the bank says, what's your collateral? My collateral is I have this watch worth $25,000. So they say, give us the watch, we'll put it in the safe. If you don't pay us back, we'll sell the watch. Right? They don't say, okay, but if you need the watch to know what time it is, we'll give you the watch. Just bring it back every night or every morning. Right? They don't do such a thing. That's not how you do business. But the Torah is telling you, we're not talking about just how you do business. We're talking about somebody who needs money. If someone needs money, they're in trouble. If they're in trouble, they don't have a lot of stuff. So you have to go out of your way to be sensitive to them. And that's what it's telling you, because you're dealing with your family, your brother. Now, here's a very interesting law. On the bottom of 432 and 433, it says as follows. If you encounter an ox of your enemy, or his donkey wandering, you shall return it to him repeatedly. If you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching under its burden, would you refrain from helping him? You should help repeatedly with him. So here it tells us the following. It says, let's say that you're walking down the street and you see your enemy's an enemy, right? Someone you don't like. You see his ox, right? And it's just wandering. So you have a mitzvah to return it to him, even though you hate him. Then it says, if you're walking down the street and you see a friend of yours, and he has an ox, or let's say a donkey, and he's got all of his stuff on the donkey's carrying stuff, right? And the donkey can't make it up the hill. It's too heavy. The stuff's too heavy. And it's painful for the donkey. But you hate this guy. You don't like this guy at all. It says you have to go and help him. You have to help him take the stuff off the donkey so the donkey can go up the hill, and help him put it back on the donkey. But it says specifically your enemy, somebody that you don't like, someone that you're having a fight with. You have to do that. That's what it says. So the Talmud asks a question. What if you are walking down the street and you see two donkeys with two masters? They're both going up the hill, and both of them have too much stuff on it. And one of them is owned by your best friend, and one of them is owned by your enemy, who you really dislike. Which one are you supposed to help? Which donkey do you unload first? Help the guy unload, and then load it back up when he's on top of the hill. So logic would tell us you do your friend, because he's your friend. You want to help out your friend. You have to help. So you'll help out your friend, then you'll help out the other guy. But the Torah says no. You have to first help out your enemy. That's why the Torah says your enemy here. Because the idea is that we have to understand now from this mitzvah, what is the basic premise of the Torah? What is the purpose? Why did God give us the Torah? What does he want to happen to us that we would use this Torah? So one of the things that God wants us to do when he gives us the Torah is that he wants that we should be able to become better people. We all have good things about us, and we all have not so good things about us. Some of us get angry easy, some of us are cheap, some of us spend money too easily, some of us are dishonest. We all have our flaws, every one of us. We also have good things about us. We didn't necessarily create these good things, and we didn't necessarily create these bad things. It's just how we were born. So we have what we call flaws, and we have good things. So the idea is that the purpose of the Torah is to help us fix those flaws, to become better people. When we die, we should be better than when we were born. That if we were born cheap, we shouldn't be cheap when we die. If we get angry easily, we shouldn't get angry easily by the time we die. In other words, during the course of our life, using the Torah as the vehicle, we should be able to become better people. And the Torah is telling us that. And this mitzvah is one of the ways to do that. Because if you see two donkeys, and the donkeys are unable to make it up the hill, they're donkeys. What do you care? The first thing is you do care because of the pain to the animal. You have to care for that. Secondly is that this animal belongs to somebody you know. And you can help that person get their stuff to the market to sell so they can make a living. So you have to help them. So by you doing that, and you're coming and you're taking them and you're helping them, right? So now you have a problem because the guy whose donkey you see, you don't like him. You don't like him at all. So why do you help him? So if you understand that the purpose of the Torah is to help us become better people, then you will make a point of helping the one you don't like. Because what does it mean you don't like this person? You're not supposed to not like a person. So therefore, what you do is you work on yourself. How do you work on yourself that you should treat a person better? Is to help them. The best way to like somebody, right? The best way to like somebody is to make them real to you, to make them human, to get to know them. Like, you have people that you can see, your neighbors, for instance, that you might not ever talk to. They say hello. You're just polite. You have no relationship with them. And if something good or bad happens to them, okay, you care because they're people and they're your neighbors, but you don't feel it because you don't really know them. But if you have a good friend, no matter where they live, and something bad happens to them, you feel it as if it was you, because that person is real to you. They become real. You're invested in them. They're a part of their life is important to you. So they feel pain, you feel pain. But your neighbor who lives next door to you, who you don't have a relationship with, it doesn't necessarily work that way. You don't necessarily feel that pain. So the Torah tells us, help the animal of the one you hate, because you don't feel the pain. So go and make him real to you. Go and work with that person. Go and help that person. Then that person becomes real, becomes alive, you care about that person. And then you won't hate them anymore. You'll have learned to change yourself to become a better person. It could be that person deserves to be hated. It could be a bad person. But still, unless they're totally evil, you're not supposed to dislike them. So you work on yourself, and that's how we do it, by accomplishing it with this mitzvah. It helps us accomplish that, to be able to become better people by way of the things that we do with these animals here. But there is an interesting point, because it says with this animal, it says, if you see the donkey of someone you hate crouching under its burden, would you refrain from helping him? You shall help repeatedly with him. Now you'll notice that in the English, and it's the same in the Hebrew, there's a change in the words. It says, would you refrain from helping him? Then it said, you shall help repeatedly with him. So in the first case it says, would you not help the person? And the second one says, you certainly shall help with him. One is to him, one is with him. Right? The first one is, how would you not help him? And the second one is, you should help with him. The point being, you see your enemy or your friend's donkey going up the hill and he can't make it. Now he knows you have a mitzvah to come and help unload it. So what does he do? He takes out, you don't like this guy, right? He probably doesn't like you either. But he knows you have to do this mitzvah. So he sees you coming. He takes out a nice lounge chair. He sits in the lounge chair and has a Coke while you do the work. Because the Torah says you have to help, right? So the Torah is telling you don't have to. It says, would you not help him? Of course you'll help him. But it says help with him. In other words, he has to also do it. Because the idea is you to interact with him. So he can't be sitting back in a lounge chair having a Coke while you unload his animal. He has to work with you. So here the commentaries who say this are also telling us an important political statement. You hear from an argument in every country of the world when you're dealing with poor people. So you want to help them. So you give them welfare, right? You give them, money, like unemployment insurance or welfare, whatever the case is, because you want to help people. Right? We pay our taxes so that people can have this. Nobody should starve. Right? But the idea is that you have an argument in the governments. On one side, they say you have to care for people, they're in need, you have to give them. The other side says if you keep giving people money, they're going to stop working and just take the money. You're not giving them an incentive to work. You're just causing them to not work. Right? That's what they call a welfare nation, right? Where everybody's living off welfare, nobody's working. Right? And that's not good. We don't want that. On the other hand, you can't let people starve to death. So how do you make it so that the people who need the welfare are not going to become people who just stay on welfare forever? They're going to go on it when they need it and then work to get off it and go off it. How do you do that? So that's what this is telling us. If you see that this person needs help with this donkey, you have an obligation to help him. But you don't have an obligation to do it yourself. He has to participate. He has to take a role. If he takes a role and he helps unload the donkey, then you have to help unload the donkey. If he doesn't, then you also don't have to. And by virtue of that, it's teaching us that if a person needs help, a person needs welfare, a person needs charity, they have to help themselves also, not only. See, the problem is when the Republicans in the U.S. and the Democrats fight about this issue, the Democrats say, give them money. Poor people need money. So give them money so they can have food, they can have education, and so forth. It's important. Republicans say, no, we give them money, they're going to be used to taking money, and they're not going to do anything. Their whole life will just be taking money. And therefore, we'll be paying, and they'll be doing nothing. So we don't want that. The truth is, there's a medium, there's a middle part, which is you give them money. They're poor. They need money to eat. Otherwise, they can't eat. That you can do. But they have to participate. They have to play a role. If it's in a big role, a little role, depending on the person, they have to do something. If they're going to do something, then you can help them. If they're not going to do anything, it's not that you can't help them, but your help will do no good. It'll do no good. Like I have people come every day to see me. Every day I do counseling. I enjoy it. I don't mind doing it. I do counseling every single day. And whatever people tell me, nobody knows. And I don't tell my wife. I don't tell their spouse. I don't tell anybody. Most people, in general, I don't even tell the people who's coming to see me. Right? That's it. You don't. It's private. But when I'm doing these sessions of counseling with people, and I see that people have problems, right? They have needs. They're not making the money. Finances are down. The economy is down. Whatever the case is, there are some people who are perpetually in trouble. They're always in trouble. Their whole life they don't make money. Their whole life, no matter what job they're in, what they're doing, how hard they just don't make money. They're just always in trouble. And other people who get in trouble for a short period and come out of it. So the person who are in trouble for a short period, that's everybody. All of us have that. We all have some time in our life when we didn't have a job or something happened that caused us to have a problem. And therefore, if we get help from somebody who cares, either counseling or money, whatever the help is, we'll get the help and we're going to put ourselves out of it. We're not going to become welfare people. We're people who needed help, and we're better. The other ones are people who are welfare people. They are just going to always be on welfare. They never are able to make a living. That is what the Torah is talking about here, where it's saying, yeah, when you have a person who's always going to be this way, who you believe is going to become a welfare person, you're allowed to help them. But you're only allowed to help them if they participate, if they do it. So make a job for them. Right? Don't it's like Roosevelt, when he was the president of the United States, he was in the Depression. And he made the New Deal. What was that? He made jobs. You had university-educated men walking around parks picking up paper, because it made no difference what they were doing. It made a difference that they were doing something, because he would give them the money, but he wanted them to do something in return. So they picked up garbage, so the city looked nicer. Right? But here you have a guy who could make, a lot of money if he was working picking up garbage. By the other hand, he's doing something. He's participating so that it's not totally charity. It's good for the person, because they don't feel like they're living that way, and it's good for society because people will not live that way very long. That's what this line in the Torah is telling us. You can help him, but you have to do it with him. And the words actually say that. You see the difference. The end, you shall help repeatedly with him. Before it says help him, then it says with him. With him means he has to participate. That's what the Torah tells us. Okay, let's see what else we can find. Okay, here we have on page 440 and 441, we have a very important quote that we're told that the Jewish people said at the giving of the Torah. We actually see they say it in this week's Parsha. It says in verse 3 in chapter 24 and 441, Moses came and told the people all the words of Hashem and all the ordinances, and the entire people responded with one voice, and they said. So here Moshe goes to all of the Jewish people, and he tells them the Torah. He tells them what he's supposed to teach them. All the laws, all the rules, all the customs, everything that a Jew's supposed to do. And the Jews said, and so now they've been told, right? So now the Jews said, all the words that Hashem has spoken, we will do. We'll do it. So this is the famous line, Na'aseh v'nishma, which is the line where the Jewish people at the giving of the Torah said, Na'aseh, we will do it, v'nishma, and we will learn it. So most people say that's really backwards. In order to nishma, to hear something, right, you can't do something until you heard it, right? If I don't tell you, go over there and close the door, you can't go over there and close the door because you don't know that I want you to, right? So until God tells them what's in the Torah, to hear it, they can't do it, but yet they say, we will do it and we will hear it. Na'aseh, we will do, nishma, we will listen. So the truth is that what it's telling us is the following. There's no question that if you don't know what you have to do, you can't do it, right? So you have to have a basic hearing before you can do it. But the Jews are saying the following, that the Torah is a book that has all kinds of laws in it. We're telling you now, we've experienced Egypt. We experienced the splitting of the Red Sea. We experienced the giving of the Torah. We experienced the 10 plagues. We experienced all of these things. We know there's the God. We know that he means well, and he wants us to have a good life. He gave us the Torah as the instruction manual for life. So we are Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do it, and we will listen. What is that telling you is that the Jews are first telling God, we are going to do whatever you tell us to do. We have had enough experience with you that we know that what you're telling us to do is true and it's good for us. But nishma, though, but then we will listen. That is to say, now we're going to be critical. We're going to question. We're going to learn. We're not going to have faith. We're going to do something. See, what the Jews are saying is that the basis of Judaism is that God commands us to follow the Torah. Understand it or don't understand it, we'll do it. We will follow the Torah. But we will not live our lives like that. We will follow the Torah 100%. But we will now investigate the Torah and study the Torah and question the Torah and critique the Torah in order to understand it. If we don't do that, we'll never know what we're doing, and we won't keep doing it. If a person is told to do the Torah and nobody explains to you why or what it means, in a short period of time you stop doing it. Because how long are you going to live your life based on faith? If I tell you it's good for you to keep kosher, and that's all I tell you, then after a while you're going to get tired of keeping kosher because it doesn't have any meaning to you. It's not real to you. So the idea is the Jews are saying, that God, you gave us the Torah, we've had experience with you, we know you mean well, period. B'nishma, and we're going to investigate it and critique it. So when people come to me often, they want to learn Torah, they want to learn more about being Jewish. So I always tell them, when you come here, I want you to not believe anything I tell you. Whatever I tell you, I want you to question me. Question it, argue, show me I'm wrong. And at the end result will be, that you'll have the true answer. After you've done this a number of times, you'll then have to evaluate, is Judaism true? Because I've gone through this, I've critiqued it, I've argued, I've used every bit of ability that I have. To the best of my knowledge, Judaism either is or is not true, based on what I know. And if you do that, then nobody can argue with you. Nobody can say, oh, you're wrong, Judaism's not true. How can you say it's true? The answer is, I tried it. I studied it. I worked at it. And I know that it's true. I don't believe that it's true. I know that it's true. Because I studied it. I learned it. And most religions of the world are based on faith. You have to believe. In fact, most religions of the world are absurd. You can't study what they say because the foundation of the religion itself doesn't make sense. It's not logical. And therefore you can't understand it. You have to just accept it. And therefore they would never say Nasa v'nishma, we'll do it and we will then critique it. They'll say we'll do it and we will believe it. And that's very different. So Judaism, as a fundamental way of life and a religious system, has within it the belief that you have to keep the Torah and you have to critique the Torah. You can't simply accept it. So therefore, if somebody truly wants to learn, if I teach them something, they should not accept it. They should question it, and then they'll know it better. That's the idea of what Judaism tells us, and that's what Nasa v'nishma in this case is saying to us, that we have to do. We have to do what it says, even if we don't know. But we have to also know. We have to find out, and that's why learning Torah is so important to us. It's such an important aspect. Let's see, we have time to talk about one more thing. Okay, now we have a whole section here on 434 and 435 which deals with bribery. With bribery, that you shouldn't accept a bribe, for the bribe will blind those who see and corrupt words that are just. That is to say, originally this is understood to be a law for judges. That God said, a judge, you're going to be a judge, you're going to have reason to be a judge, we need judges. Don't take bribes. And don't accept bribes, because if you do, it'll corrupt you. So, first thing is, I think that that's pretty logical. If you're a judge, and your job is that people should come to you, and you should adjudicate, you should figure out the truth of what they're saying, who's right and who's wrong, you certainly can't take a bribe, because then you're not going to do what your job is, right? I don't know if you need God to tell you that. That's logical. And if I had a court system, that I had a judge who was taking bribes, I'd throw him out, because he's not going to do his job. He's going to do whatever the person wants. But that's not what the Torah is telling you. That's understood. The Torah says you can understand that. The Torah is saying is that that a judge cannot take a bribe, even if he doesn't think it's a bribe. So it gives examples of what that would be. For instance, let's say that you're related to somebody. They're related to you. So that would be like taking a bribe, because you already are favoring that person. But what about if that person is similar to you? You're both Canadians. You're the judge, and one of the litigants is Canadian. The other one is French. You're probably going to favor the one who's Canadian, right? Whatever the case is. In other words, that Torah is telling us that bribery corrupts the mind of people, and and therefore it's not really just for judges. It's for us as well. Right? You know how they have the statement, which is very often true, that when a school calls the mother and says the kid did something wrong, the mother will say, "My son will never do that." But yet they did. They did it. They really did it. Why? Because the mother who loves the child without any reason, she just loves the child, no matter who that child is blinded because of bribery, so to speak, because of her love, from a lot of the facts. It's like, you ever watch television and they always interview the mother of a criminal as they're leaving the court, or the wife of a criminal. You had like Jeffrey Dahmer, is a man who murdered and ate people back in the 80s. After his court case, where he was found guilty of doing this and put in jail for the rest of his life for being a murderer and a cannibal, they asked his mother, "What do you think?" So he says, "He's a good boy. His friends weren't so good." He wasn't a good boy. He was a sociopath. He was a dangerous person. But his mother couldn't see it. She just couldn't see it, because she was blinded, because she loved him. She couldn't, because inside he was a good boy, but he was a good boy who was ill, right? So, yeah?
No, and maybe the fact that it was like that, the mother, you know, was twisted too, so
Maybe.
she twisted him, and
Maybe she was so blinded to reality as a whole that she caused him to be this way. That could be, but I think if we don't go that extreme, we all feel it in our own lives. We often will see our children do something and immediately presume it's the influence of their friends, even though it could be our child is the one who's influencing the friends. That's a normal reaction. That's why the Torah tells you don't take bribes, because if you're going to have to make a decision on anything, you have to make sure that it's being done in a fair manner. And not that you are looking for bribes or you want bribes and don't do it, because that's for sure going to corrupt you. You're corrupt. You're going to say that the one is right is the one who gives you the most money. That's not being a judge. That's terrible. But the point is that many things that happen to us are going to affect us so that we can't judge normally either, even if you don't have an intent to do anything wrong. You intend to judge someone correctly. So the Torah says, don't treat the litigants different. Don't tell one to stand and one can sit. Don't let one speak a long time, the other one can only speak a short time. Don't let one come dressed up like a rich man, the other one like a schlepper. Make sure that they come and they're similar, because you can't treat one different than the other. You have to treat them the same. So that's what it's telling us. So it applies not just with judges, it applies to us all in the way we live our lives, to make sure that we understand that as honest as we are and as well-meaning as we are blinded by bribery, even if we don't consider it bribery. And the example of the child with the mother could be the child and a father, a husband and a wife, right? People can have a child get into all types of terrible things, and for instance, you could be a policeman, and your own child could be a drug abuser, and you won't know it. And you're saying, how could he not know it? He's a policeman. He deals with drug abusers all the time. The reason is because he doesn't think that his child could do this. So whenever he sees something that looks like a sign of his son using drugs, he always comes up with another reason. And, people who use drugs are usually grumpy, and they sleep a lot, and they don't act normally, and things disappear because they need to use it for money, to steal for money, to just get drugs. So the policeman's seeing this going on in his house, and he just thinks nothing of it, because he doesn't think that his child could be doing that. That's because he's bribed, so to speak. That's how we all are. So that's what the Torah is telling us, that we have to keep that in mind, that we have that potential to not be fully forthright because of it. And that doesn't mean that you can't love someone or you can't take things from someone. It means that if you have to judge a case, you need to know that will affect your ability to be fair. Not as a judge, but as a mother, as a spouse, as a colleague, as a person at work, whatever it is, we have to keep that in mind, because the human brain was set up to favor people that we like. Right? And wherever we like them, we like them. But to have disfavor with people we don't like. There's a statement that says that when you love somebody, like I use this in marriage counseling all the time, when you love somebody, no matter what they do, you can overlook it. But when you don't love them, everything they do is a problem. Right? The same person who would say that they don't mind that their spouse snores because they love their spouse, so they learn to live with it, will when they're upset with their spouse, will want to get a divorce because their spouse snores. Same thing. Why? Because you see how our mind works. Our mind is corrupted that way. And it's not evil, it's just a fact. That's how God made us. So we need to remember that. Okay? We better conclude here.